This is the Hawkendross International Trading mini pod or podcast. Today we're going to be covering an interesting topic, bit outside the usual educational stuff. Today we're going to cover something that very few people know about. We're going to cover today. Sorry, I can't even explain what I'm going to say here. We're going to cover Russia's SPFS banking transfer system. This is a very little known about subject. I'm surprised not more people globally know about this. I guess it's sort of still something that's in the works, but after the war with Ukraine and after the war with Ukraine started, as we all know, soon after that, Russia was booted off the SWIFT system. But Russia, for the last now 7, 8 years, has been developing its own SWIFT system called the SPFS system. So I think this is something that would be worth looking at, considering this will have effects. This will may change the game. Probably will change the game in the near future in terms of international trade. And we may start to see the moving away of the US dollar as the global sort of reserve currency or main currency used for international trade, though I think that won't happen for some time. But due to the war in Ukraine, and I think now with further polarization in the world occurring, you can see some of the reports and pictures regarding the SPFS system. I think we're going to see more alternatives to the current banking system and trade system. So currently, SWIFT is sort of is what's used globally for making banking transactions and whatnot. But Russia has been developing its own since 2014. Actually, we're going to cover this. So I've got a whole bunch of notes here that I'm going to run through, and I'm going to give you a very detailed rundown of SPFS. I think it's important to discuss this because this will, I think, increasingly become something that will become more prominent in the world of international trade. Currently, we're still, SWIFT is still king, but with currently with what's happening, I think we're going to see the BRICS countries, and people and buyers and sellers outside of your typical NATO and OECD countries are going to be starting to use. I think they'll start to adopt and use SPFS more. So it's going to be interesting to see the development of this. Sorry, I should say it's actually been it's been about 9 years now, 2014, so it's 2023. I can't do my math now. Forgive me, it's late here, so I'm not quite sharp, but I think it's important that we do look at this subject. So, all right, so let's look at SPFS. So SPFS in Russian, I'll try to see if I can pronounce this in Russian. Sistema Perelavny or Peredavny. Okay, forget it. I'm not. Okay, here we go. There's a Roman. Here's a anglicized spelling. Sistema Peredaki or Peredaki finansovik subskeni. Okay. Probably butchered it, but anyway. System for transfer of financial messages is a Russian equivalent of the SWIFT financial transfer system developed by the Central Bank of Russia. The system has been in successful development since 2014, when the United States government threatened to disconnect the Russian Federation from the SWIFT system. So back in 2014, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there were issues. This was during the time of the late Obama regime, and there was, as we know from the Obama years, there was a lot of conflict and between not direct conflict with Russia, but there was a lot of I guess indirect conflict with Russia at the time, and Russia was threatened with being kicked off the SWIFT system at the time. So at that point, Putin probably in Russia decides, and the central bank decides, well, we've got to create our own banking system, and this is really what is the product of that was the product of that situation. So they realized they had to create their own system, which I think makes a lot of sense, and currently I think is probably a good idea, considering now that the way the West has become so arrogant and so, you know, arrogant to the point that they think that they can do, like, they can, let's put it this way. If they don't agree with your politics, they can just kick you off the SWIFT system. So, I mean, I think it's high time there was an alternative to the SWIFT banking system, or, I mean, yeah, transfer system, which is needed. Like I said before, I think we're heading into a multipolar world anyway. So I think this is a good development. Anyway, less about the politics and more into the history of the SPFS system. The first transaction on the SPFS network involving an on-bank enterprise was executed in December 2017. In March 2018, over 400 institutions, mostly banks, were part of the network. Compared to SWIFT, the system faced a number of challenges, especially higher transaction costs, though in March 2018, transaction fees were radically reduced to, 80 cents to a dollar. What is that, ruble? 1 ruble? Sorry, $80 ruble. Doesn't make any sense. 80 cents to a dollar to 1 ruble, which is equivalent to 0.012 to 0.015 cents per transaction. Currently, the system only works within Russia, though there were plans afoot in 2018 to integrate the network with the China-based cross-border interbank payments system. The Russian government is also in talks to expand the SPFS to developing countries such as Turkey and Iran. Owing to its current limitations, the SPFS system is seen as a last resort rather than as a replacement for the SWIFT network. Since 2019, many agreements have been reached to link SPFS to other countries' payment systems in China, or India, Iran, as well as other countries inside the EU who are planning to use SPFS directly. At the end of 2020, there were 23 foreign banks connected to the SPFS from Armenia, Belarus, Germany, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Switzerland. On March 17, 2022, Anatoly Aksakov, chairman of the State Duma Committee on the Financial Market, announced that the Bank of Russia and the People's Republic of China were working on connecting the Russian and Chinese financial messaging systems. He also pointed to the beginning of the development of information transfer schemes using blockchains, including the digital ruble and the digital yuan. On March 31st, 2022, the Economic Times of India published information that the Indian government has offered Russia a new transaction system with the transfer of trade to the ruble and SPFS, which will work through the Reserve Bank of India and Russia's, oh boy, here we go, Vneshekonom Bank. According to the same data, the system will be put into operation within a week. In April 2022, Russian central bank governor said most Russian financial institutions and 52 foreign organizations from at least 12 countries were successfully integrated with the SPFS. On January 30th, 2023, Iran had fully integrated with SPFS. That's interesting, to help enhance trade and financial operations in an effort to bypass strict economic sanctions on their financial infrastructure. Well done. With the signing of the agreement, 52 Iranian and 106 Russian banks are connected through the SPFS. So that's very interesting. So that might actually give Iran a lot of options in terms of banking, because I'll tell you one thing, having dealt in this business, Iran has a lot of problems, and one of those is banking instruments. If you want to buy out of Iran, you effectively either have to pay deposit, you have to actually pay in cash, or bank transfer. You cannot issue. Well, even there, you probably can't do it. You have to, we want direct anyway, but basically everything to Iran has to be via a third party. You cannot send money direct to Iran. And you're very much not likely going to do it by LC. So this probably gives Iran, this would probably help boost Iran's economy, which is good, because then that will actually make it easier for them to do a lot of business. So that's actually a very interesting development there. So so much for the West's, sort of dominance on the banking system. Geoeconomic impact, as summarized by academic Tim Beale, SPFS is among the responses to sanctions imposed by the United States, viewed by commentators as sorry, let me reread that. Summarized by academic Tim Beale, SPFS is among the responses to sanctions imposed by the United States, viewed by commentators as contributing to de-dollarization. Well, of course it is, because effectively now you're telling by banning them, taking off the system, you're basically forcing Russia to fend for itself. And Russia is not going to, the Russians and Russia is not going to sit there and just be like, oh well, what are we gonna? We can't do anything now. No, of course they're gonna form their own system. All you're effectively doing is just basically pushing people out the door. And when you push people out the door, they'll just start fending for themselves, and they'll just create a competitor. So if the West wants to be arrogant and ignorant, that's fine. So I actually look. I think this is good. I think this is good for international trade. I think it's going to provide more options. I think it's going to make it. By having more options, it'll make it easier, and as well as that, you won't have to deal with the SWIFT system only. So I think anything that provides a variety or options is good. So I think this is going to be good for international trade as a whole, though I think it will take some more time to really see this start to, I guess, be used a bit more. Some other basic points. It's headquartered in Russia, Moscow, Russia. Parent is the Bank of Russia. So the Bank of Russia is the parent of the SPFS system. I guess that's it in a nutshell. There is an interesting article here from 2019, I think it is, that looked at this. October 2nd, 2019, yeah, and mentions the 8 foreign banks to join Russian transfer system. So in this one, 8 foreign banks have signed up for the Russian version of the world's payment system. Central Bank of Russia today. Yeah, cool. The Russia could be cut off from the SWIFT system. That's interesting. So they even use of 2017, 2019. I might just read this because this is actually not bad. 8 foreign banks joined Russian transfer system October 2nd, 2019. Payment system launched in response to sanctions opens up to foreign users. 8 foreign banks have signed up for the Russian version of the worldwide payment system SWIFT. The Central Bank of Russia said today the system for the trade of financial messages SPFS was launched in December 2017 as a response to fears that Russia could be cut off from SWIFT, the system that allows for bank transfers around the world. Speaking at a banking conference in Moscow today, Alla Bakina, who leads the development and rollout of the system for the central bank, said we have provided the opportunity for foreign banks and legal entities to connect to SPFS. Today, the system had around 400 users, including 8 foreign entities. Bakina said, I think it's Bakina, I think in Russian, added that the usage of SWIFT was also growing, and with daily traffic on the service of around 15% of that recorded on SWIFT, up from 11% last year. 3 of the foreign banks are already using the system, and 5 are awaiting approval to join. Bakina said that the banks were registered in countries of the Eurasian Economic Union, according to RIA Novosti. So Eurasia, you're looking at, those are countries that's basically, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, that part of the world. Opening up SPFS to foreign banks was part of Vladimir Putin's agenda laid out after his election victory last year. Participating banks were not named, but do have previously been reported. Bill Gazprom Bank, the Belarusian subsidiary of Gazprom Bank, and the Eurasian Bank of Kazakhstan. Well, there you go. I called it. Let's actually look at this article. This could be interesting, actually. So what would exclusion from payment system SWIFT mean for Russia? Discussion among European leaders about new restrictions on Moscow have again raised fears of the SWIFT international system. All right, hang on. What is this from? Wow, so that actually goes back even further. This goes back to January 20th, 2015. Discussions among European leaders about new sanctions on Moscow have again raised fears that the SWIFT international payment system might be cut off, a move that experts warn would wreak financial havoc on Russia. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT, is a cornerstone of the world's financial architecture and integral to the functioning of Russia's stock exchanges and its central depository, as well its banks and companies. In 2012, Western countries forced the Belgian-based payments system to cut ties with Iran, a move credited with bringing Tehran to the negotiating table over its nuclear program. Before SWIFT, they used telexes, which are now in museums. Said Vasily Solodkov, head of the Banking Institute at the Higher School of Economics. Russia used to use stallions and sticks as money, as we could return to that, but why, he asked. Under discussion, amid surging violence in eastern Ukraine, fueled by Kremlin support for separatist rebellion, foreign ministers are concerned. They include a new round of sanctions, limited reaction. Okay, well, basically, SWIFT in Russia. The core of SWIFT's work is a secure financial messaging service that communicates payment orders to be settled at a correspondent accounts that one financial institution holds with another financial institution. The network has become key to the functioning of Russia's financial system since the first bank began to use the service in 1989. That kind of coincides with the fall of the Soviet Union. About 360,000 such messages are sent daily, making Russia the second most prolific user of SWIFT in the world. The head of SWIFT in Russia, Roman Chernov, told a conference last year, according to RIA Novosti, over 600 Russian financial institutions use SWIFT, which saw 40% growth in its traffic in 2014. He said, back 20 or 30 years, an exclusion from SWIFT would not cause the Russian financial system to break down, but it would generate severe complications, particularly with international payments, analysts said. It will be a step backwards of 20 or 30 years, said Sergei Grigorian, the head of the analysis department at the Association of Russian Banks. Domestic payments could be clumsily rerouted by the central bank, but there would be limited options for international payments. Over 90% of the total payments currently being made by Russian banks to foreign destinations are made via SWIFT, according to Grigorian. Other possible options for replacing SWIFT include internet transfers. Analysts said the security risks were too high for channeling money through accounts at foreign banks, adding an extra link to the chain of transfer. There are no other available systems. Clients have to open correspondent accounts with Chinese banks and work through them, said the Higher School of Economics facility, Solodkov. An intermediary is extra costs and extra time. So I'm going to be covering this more. This is a very interesting subject, the SPFS system and banking as a whole, because it has huge implications on international trade. The two are effectively intertwined because wherever you have trade, you have finance and money, and a need to have a bank or at least some place that collects money and transfers money and sends money. So there's been, I don't believe anything's been said about this in the news, at least not in like mainstream news. So I don't know if because there's a deliberate attempt to keep this quiet, or whether because no one really knows about it or really cares outside of Russia. I mean, I think it's quite interesting because, like I said, Russia is one of the biggest exporters of basically most things. And so for Russia to do this, I think you're going to see, I think it's only going to help Russia in the long term. And I think it's going to be great for people who do business with Russia, because I think it's just going to make it easier. You're not going to need to rely on the SWIFT system. And now with the sanctions, you'll be able to use an actual banking system to make payments. Whereas currently or previously, you might have to have it rerouted. So I think this is good. That's probably all I'll say about that today. Um, I think that's all I can really think of in terms of discussion for this, although I'm sure there's more I can bring up. But at this point, that's really what kind of comes to mind regarding this. Like I said, I'll definitely be looking at this in further detail over the course, of the next, I guess in the near future. I'll be looking at this further because there'll probably be other updates and whatnot, and probably more info I could discuss regarding this. But I think we'll leave it there for now. We've covered a good amount of territory with this. So I'll just plug our website here, www.alcatraztrading.com. You can, we have a forum, so you can become a member. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. Like I said, you can become a member. You can go into our forum. You can ask questions, make comments, make requests, make new friends, network. So that's what that's there for. Our services page here tells us informs you of our services, our procedures, our products. So, have a gander when you get a chance. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Gab, Twitter, LinkedIn, pretty much on every social media site you can think of, probably except Snapchat. We don't use Snapchat. What's the other one? There's a few other ones we don't really use. We're also on BeContact, so we're pretty much a major social media handle. So yeah. Like I said, we'll cover this topic again, but I think we'll leave that for now. I think we'll leave it as is for now. So yeah, that brings it into this mini pod or podcast. I guess this has been a bit more than a mini pod because we are looking at about 20 minutes or over 20 minutes. So I would say this is probably more of a podcast. So we'll leave it there. That ends the podcast on this subject. This is Konstantin Alcatraz signing out, and we'll catch you later.